The rain came down in sheets cold and merciless, hammering the old marble stones like angry fists. I stood knee-deep in mud inside the Reed family graveyard, my dress plastered to my skin, my hands raw and bleeding. The small shovel shook in my grip as I drove it one last time into the soft earth of the forgotten grave at the edge of the plot. My breath came in ragged gasps. Every muscle burned. But I couldn't stop. Because somewhere in that grave lay the truth that could destroy everything I had protected for 4 long years. A single charred letter had led me here. I'd found it hidden behind the loose panel in my bedroom wall just hours earlier, a desperate note from a woman long dead, confessing that Sophie Reed, the gentle girl I'd cared for like my own sister, was never a Reed by blood. She was the daughter of a poor seamstress who had been silenced with money and threats. One line still burned behind my eyes. They took my child and gave her their name. But the papers are buried where no one will look. So I looked. My fingers finally scraped against something hard. A small tin box. I yanked it free, pried open the lid with trembling hands, and there they were, yellowed documents, a faded birth record, a sealed letter from a midwife. Proof, real proof. For one breathless moment, the rain seemed to quiet. Then came the sound of hooves. Fast, furious, cutting through the storm. I froze. A lantern swung wildly in the distance, growing brighter. The rider crested the hill and thundered straight toward the graveyard. Even through the downpour, I knew that silhouette, tall, commanding shoulders squared against the night, as if the world itself bent to his will. Nathan Reed, the Duke of Ashworth, the man whose quiet authority ruled every corner of this vast estate, and the man I had foolishly secretly loved in silence for years. He reined in his horse just outside the iron gate. The lantern light cut across his face, revealing sharp cheekbones, dark eyes narrowed against the rain, and a jaw clenched so tight it looked carved from stone. I clutched the tin box to my chest, mud and water streaming down my arms. My heart hammered louder than the storm. He dismounted in one fluid motion, boots sinking into the earth as he strode toward me. No words at first, just the heavy crunch of his steps and the relentless beat of rain on stone. When he finally stopped barely 3 feet away, his gaze dropped to the open grave, then to the box in my hands. His voice low and edged with ice, cut through the downpour. "What have you done, Miss Hayes?" I tried to speak, but my throat closed. All I could see was Sophie's trusting smile this morning when she thanked me for reading to her. All I could feel was the terror of what would happen if the secret escaped. She would lose her home, her name, her future, everything. And the man standing before me, the one whose rare, quiet smiles had once made my chest ache with impossible longing. He now looked at me like I was the threat. I took one shaky step back, boots slipping in the mud. I had to know, I whispered, voice breaking. For Sophie. She deserves the truth. Nathan's eyes flashed with something raw, anger perhaps, or pain he would never admit. He reached out fast as a striking whip and snatched the tin box from my arms. His fingers brushed mine for the briefest second. Even through the cold rain, his touch burned. He opened the box, scanned the first document. His expression didn't change, but I saw the muscle jump in his jaw, the way his shoulders tensed, as if the weight of generations suddenly pressed down on him. Then he looked up at me, rain streaming down his face, like tears he would never allow himself to shed. "You just dug up the grave of my family, to save a girl who was never ours to begin with." His voice dropped even lower, dangerous and cold. "Miss Hayes, you have touched something that was never meant for you. He closed the box with a sharp snap that echoed like a gunshot in the storm. And in that moment, standing soaked and terrified in the Reed family graveyard at midnight, I realized two terrible truths at once. The secret I had risked everything to uncover could destroy the only home Sophie had ever known. And the man I had loved in silence might be the one forced to destroy me for it. The first gray light of dawn was just touching the windows when the summons came. Mr. Harlan's knock was quiet, respectful, but impossible to ignore. His Grace requests your presence in the study, Miss Hayes. At once. I had not slept. My hands still carried the dirt of the graveyard beneath my nails, no matter how hard I scrubbed. I changed into a fresh dress, pinned my damp hair tightly, and walked the long corridor with a heart that felt like it was trying to claw its way out of my chest. Every smile she gave me felt like a knife between my ribs. One afternoon, I watched helplessly as Theo Bennett arrived and pulled his sister into the blue parlor for a private conversation. Through the half-open door, I heard him speak in that brisk, practical tone he always used when he believed he was doing the right thing. Mr. Everett Lang is a solid match, Sophie. Good family, steady fortune. You would be well cared for. Sophie's voice was quiet, but steady. I barely know him, Theo. You will have time to know him. This is how these things are done. I turned away before they could see me, my chest aching with a rage I had no right to feel. That same evening, Grace Reed took her brother's arm during a walk in the rose garden and spoke in her light, persuasive way. Tessa Lang would make an excellent Duchess, Nathan. She's graceful, well-connected, and she admires you greatly. I stood at the window watching them, my hands pressed so tightly against the glass that my knuckles turned white. Nathan gave no clear answer, only that small, distant nod he used when he wished to end a conversation without argument. Yet the image of him walking beside another woman burned behind my eyes long after the sun went down. Nights became the worst. I lay awake in my narrow bed, staring at the ceiling while the house slept around me. The tin box and its terrible papers haunted every shadow. Sometimes I pressed my face into the pillow so no one would hear the quiet, broken sounds I couldn't hold back. In the darkest hours, I lit a single candle and wrote letters I would never sign. Letters addressed to Dr. Elias Grant, Nathan's old friend, and the only man I knew who might understand both medicine and morality. I asked him about the weight of secrets, about the damage truth could do to a fragile heart, about whether protecting someone sometimes meant lying to them forever. I never sent them. I burned each one in the small fireplace and watched the ashes curl and disappear. Every time Nathan passed me in the corridor, every time our eyes met for the briefest second, something inside me twisted painfully. I still loved him. God help me, I did. But I also hated the cold authority in his voice, the way he could lock away a human life behind the walls of duty and family name, as if it were nothing more than another ledger to balance. Yet I made a decision. I would not be the one to destroy Sophie. I would protect her the only way I could, quietly, carefully, dangerously. Late one night, after the house had gone still, I slipped into the small, unused sitting room at the end of the east wing. From the bottom drawer of an old writing desk, I took out a fresh notebook. On the first page, I began writing down every scrap of information I could remember from the tin box. Every name, every date, every fragile clue. I was no longer just Sophie's companion. I had become the keeper of a secret that could ruin us all, and the only person willing to fight for the truth without speaking it aloud. I closed the notebook and hid it beneath the loose floorboard under the window. My hands were shaking, because I knew with terrible clarity that I had just stepped onto a path from which there was no safe return. I was playing a dangerous game. Alone. The grand ballroom of Reed Manor glowed with hundreds of candles and the soft shimmer of silk and crystal. Laughter rose and fell like waves, but beneath it all, something darker was moving. I stood near the tall windows, my simple gray gown making me nearly invisible among the swirling colors. Sophie looked radiant tonight, in pale rose, her dark hair pinned with fresh pearls. She was laughing at something Caleb Holt had said, her eyes bright for the first time in days. Then Victor Lang entered the room. He moved through the crowd with the confidence of a man who believed the future already belonged to him. His voice carried just far enough when he leaned toward an older gentleman near the refreshment table. Blood will tell in the end. Some foundations are weaker than they appear, especially when secrets have been buried too long. The words were vague, but they were enough. Sophie froze mid-sentence. Her smile faltered. I saw the exact moment the color drained from her face. Her hand trembled as she set down her glass. She turned, searching the room with wide, frightened eyes before slipping quietly toward the side door that led to the garden. I followed without thinking. The night air outside was cool and heavy with the scent of roses. I found Sophie leaning against the stone balustrade, breathing too fast, her arms wrapped tightly around herself. "Sophie?" I whispered, stepping closer. She looked at me, and the pain in her eyes nearly broke me. "Elena." "Did you hear him?" He said, "Blood will tell." What does that mean? Why would he say that about our family? I wanted to pull her into my arms and tell her everything. The words rose so sharply in my throat, I had to press my lips together to keep them inside. Instead, I reached out and gently touched her shoulder. People say foolish things at parties, especially when they've had too much wine. Mr. Lang has always been ambitious. Don't let him spoil your evening. She searched my face for a long moment. I held her gaze, praying she couldn't see the lie trembling behind my eyes. "I feel like something is wrong," she whispered. "Like the ground is shifting beneath me, and I don't know why." Before I could answer, footsteps sounded on the gravel path. Nathan appeared at the edge of the garden lantern light, catching the sharp lines of his face. He was alone. His eyes found me immediately. "Miss Hayes, a word." Sophie glanced between us, then excused herself with a small, uncertain curtsy. She disappeared back into the brightness of the ballroom, leaving me standing alone with the Duke under the cold stars. He waited until the door clicked shut before he spoke. "You've been different these past days. Tense, watchful." His voice was quiet, but there was steel beneath it. "If you know something, Elena, if you're hiding something from me, tell me now." The sound of my given name on his lips sent an unwelcome shiver through me. I looked up at him. The man I had loved in silence for so long stood only steps away, yet the distance between us had never felt wider. I saw the conflict in his eyes, the heavy burden of duty warring with something gentler, something almost vulnerable. For one dangerous heartbeat, the truth surged forward again. I wanted to tell him that I had found the papers, that I knew Sophie was not his blood, that I was terrified every single day that the lie we were all living would crush her, that I still loved him even while I resented the cold wall he had built around his heart. But I saw the way his shoulders carried the weight of every Reed who had come before him. I saw the exhaustion he tried so hard to hide. So I swallowed the truth once more. "I'm only worried for Sophie," I said softly. "She deserves to be happy. That is all." Nathan studied me for a long moment. The silence stretched thick and heavy. Just when I thought he would press harder, he exhaled slowly and looked away toward the dark garden. Sometimes I wonder if I have protected this family, or simply imprisoned it. His words hung between us, raw and unexpected. Before either of us could speak again, the ballroom doors opened once more. Caleb Holt stepped out into the garden, his expression serious. He walked straight toward us with quiet determination. "Your Grace," he said, bowing slightly, "I hope you will forgive my directness, but I have come to care deeply for Miss Sophie Reed. If there is any threat to her happiness or her future, I intend to stand beside her, no matter what may come." Nathan's gaze sharpened. For the first time that night, then I saw genuine surprise cross his face. He looked at Caleb as if seeing him clearly for the very first time. The younger man continued, voice steady. "She is more than a name or an inheritance. She is a person worthy of protection and choice." Nathan said nothing, but something shifted in his posture, a subtle crack in the armor of duty he wore so tightly. I slipped away while they spoke, my heart pounding. Later, when the last guests had gone and the house had fallen quiet, I returned to the small, unused sitting room. My hands were still shaking as I lifted the loose floorboard. I reached for my hidden notebook, and my fingers brushed against something else. An old folded letter, yellowed with age, written in Nathan's own hand, dated nearly 4 years ago. My breath caught. It was addressed to Dr. Elias Grant. In careful, measured words, Nathan had written, "I have reason to believe the girl is not of Reed blood. Yet I have chosen to give her the protection of our name. Some truths are kinder when left buried." He had known. All this time. He had known part of the truth and had chosen silence. I sank slowly to the floor, the letter trembling in my hands. Tears burned behind my eyes, but I did not let them fall. The man I loved had been carrying the same terrible secret I was. And still, he had demanded that I forget. The fire inside me burned hotter than ever, silent, but no longer small. The clock in the hallway had just struck midnight when the summons came again. This time there was no polite knock from Mr. Harlan, only a quiet footman who delivered the message with lowered eyes. "His Grace awaits you in his private study, Miss Hayes." Immediately, my heart slammed against my ribs as I walked the dimly lit corridor. The letter I had found earlier still burned in my pocket like a live coal. I had not yet decided what to do with it. Nathan stood waiting in the center of the room, the fire casting long shadows across his face. On the desk in front of him lay a thick bundle of old documents tied with black ribbon papers, far older and more complete than the ones I had unearthed in the graveyard. He did not speak until the door clicked shut behind me. Then very quietly, he said, "Sit down, Elena." I remained standing. He exhaled slowly, picked up the bundle, and placed it directly in front of me. "I have known for almost 4 years," he said, his voice low and rough. "Sophie was never my blood. I discovered the truth shortly after her father died, and she came under my guardianship. These papers prove it beyond any doubt." The room seemed to tilt. I stared at the documents, then back at his face. My voice came out barely above a whisper. "You knew." All this time, Nathan's eyes met mine. There was no cold authority in them now, only exhaustion and something that looked painfully close to regret. I chose silence because I believed the truth would destroy her. She had already lost so much. I thought giving her the Reed name would protect her, that it would be kinder. He stepped closer, the firelight flickering across the sharp lines of his jaw. "I was wrong to demand that you forget what you found. But I was trying to shield this family, and the girl I had come to care for as my own. The words hit me like a physical blow. All the nights I had lain awake, torn between love and resentment, came rushing back. All the times I had watched him make decisions with that unyielding sense of duty. And now I saw the man beneath the title, a man carrying centuries of responsibility on his shoulders, forced again and again to choose between justice and loyalty. My chest tightened until it hurt. "You used your power to bury the truth," I said, my voice trembling but steady. "You decided for all of us what we were allowed to know. Did you ever once consider what that would cost Sophie? Or me?" Nathan flinched. It was small, but I saw it. The first real crack in the armor he had worn for so long. Before he could answer, heavy footsteps echoed in the hallway outside. The door burst open without warning. Victor Lang stormed in, rain still glistening on his coat, his face twisted with greed and triumph. "I know everything," he snarled. "The girl is not a Reed. That fortune belongs to the true bloodline to me. Give me what is rightfully mine tonight, or by morning the entire county will know your precious ward is nothing but a bastard child dressed in silk." The air in the room turned to ice. I stepped forward, instinctively placing myself between Victor and the desk. My hands were shaking, but I refused to move. Then the door opened again, softer this time. Sophie stood on the threshold, still in her rose-colored evening gown, her face pale but strangely calm. She had clearly heard every word. For one terrible moment, no one spoke. Sophie walked slowly into the room, her eyes moving from Victor to Nathan, then finally to me. She looked not broken, not even surprised, only deeply, quietly resolved. "I am not a Reed by blood," she said, her voice clear and steady. "I understand that now. But I have been loved and protected in this house for years. That is what made me who I am, not a name on a piece of paper." She turned to Victor, her chin lifted with quiet dignity. "You may take whatever legal claim you believe you have, but you will never take my worth. That is mine alone." Victor opened his mouth to argue, but the look in Sophie's eyes stopped him cold. He backed away, muttering threats under his breath, and finally left the room, slamming the door behind him. The silence that followed was deafening. Nathan stood motionless for a long moment. Then slowly, he did something I had never seen him do in all the years I had known him. He lowered himself to one knee in front of both of us, not as the Duke of Ashworth, not as the head of the Reed family, but as a man. "I was wrong," he said, his voice rough with emotion he no longer tried to hide. "I thought I was protecting you both by controlling the truth. Instead, I only added to the weight you were already carrying. Sophie, Elena, forgive me. Not as your guardian, not as your duke, but as a man who has made a terrible mistake." Tears stung my eyes. I looked down at him, this powerful man on his knees, and felt something inside my chest break open. The truth had cut like a knife tonight. But for the first time, it felt like the kind of cut that could finally begin to heal. The morning after the storm broke clear and bright, as if the sky itself had decided it was time for truth to breathe. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows of the library at Reed Manor, catching dust motes that danced like tiny stars. Nathan Reed stood at the head of the long oak table, his shoulders straight, but his eyes softer than I had ever seen them. Around the table sat those who mattered most. Grace Reed with her hands folded tightly in her lap. Theo Bennett looking unusually quiet. Olivia Brooks watching everything with her calm, perceptive gaze. Caleb Holt seated beside Sophie, and Dr. Elias Grant leaning forward with quiet concern. Nathan did not waste words. "I have called you here because secrets have lived in these walls long enough," he began, his voice low and steady. Sophie is not a Reed by blood. I have known this truth for years, and I chose to hide it. Last night, that choice nearly cost us everything. A heavy silence settled over the room. Grace's eyes widened. Theo opened his mouth and then closed it again. Olivia simply nodded once, as though she had suspected something all along. Nathan continued laying the old documents on the table for everyone to see. Victor Lang believed he could use this truth to take what does not belong to him. He threatened scandal. He demanded money and land. He has been sent away with nothing. This house will never again open its doors to him. Sophie sat very still, her hands resting lightly on the edge of the table. When Nathan finished speaking, she rose slowly to her feet. All eyes turned to her. "I heard the truth last night," she said quietly. Her voice did not shake. "And I have thought about it until the sun came up. I am not angry. I am grateful. Grateful for every year I was given in this home, for every kindness, every lesson, every moment of love I received here." She looked around the table, her dark eyes clear and bright. "I will keep the name Reed, not because of blood, but because of love and loyalty. Because this family chose me when I had no one. And I choose you in return." A soft breath of relief moved through the room. Sophie turned to Caleb Holt, who had been watching her with steady, open affection. "And Mr. Holt, I accept the feelings you have shown me, but I will only move forward if I am free to choose my own path. No arrangements, no pressure, just honest hearts." Caleb smiled a genuine, warm smile that reached his eyes. "I would want nothing less," he said softly. Nathan watched the exchange with something like quiet wonder on his face. Then he looked at me. "Elena, would you walk with me?" We left the others in the library and stepped out into the garden behind the house. The air smelled of wet earth and fresh roses after the rain. Sunlight filtered through the leaves, painting everything in soft gold. We walked slowly along the gravel path until we reached the stone bench beneath the old oak tree. Nathan stopped and turned to face me. For a long moment, he simply looked at me, as if gathering courage he rarely needed. "I have carried secrets for so long," he said at last, "that I forgot how it feels to speak from the heart without calculation. But I will not hide anymore." He took a small step closer. "I love you, Elena Hayes. Not out of pity, not out of responsibility. I have loved you for years because of your strength, your honesty, and the way you refuse to look away from what is right, even when it terrifies you. You made me want to be a better man." My breath caught. Tears rose unbidden to my eyes. I reached out and touched his hand, feeling the warmth of his skin against mine. "I have loved you in silence for so long it became part of me," I whispered. "But I cannot be another secret in your life, Nathan. I will not hide in shadows anymore. If we do this, it must be in the light." He lifted my hand and pressed it gently to his chest, right over his heart. "Then, let it be in the light," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "No more hiding, no more silence. From tonight onward, everything between us will be honest and open." We stood there beneath the oak tree as the morning light wrapped around us, two hearts that had carried too much alone, finally finding their way to each other. That evening, the long dining table was set, not with stiff formality, but with simple warmth. Mrs. Whittaker directed the servants with a gentle smile, instead of her usual strict efficiency. Mr. Harlan sat at the table for the first time, no longer standing in the shadows. Old Mr. Sawyer had been invited in from the garden, his weathered hands resting comfortably on the polished wood. We ate together, Grace, Theo, Olivia, Caleb, Sophie, Nathan, and I, laughing softly, sharing stories, letting the masks of title and duty fall away. Sophie sat beside Caleb, their shoulders brushing now and then, with quiet affection. Grace watched her brother with new understanding in her eyes. Even Theo seemed lighter, as if a weight had finally been lifted from his shoulders. As the candles burned lower, Nathan reached under the table and took my hand in his. He did not let go. And in that moment, surrounded by the people who had become my family, I understood the deepest truth of all. Real justice does not come from bloodlines or titles. It comes from the courage to speak the truth and the choice to love instead of hide. Finally, let me send my deep thanks to you. Thank you for listening and for allowing this story to speak to your heart. The Wild West still holds countless truths, some painful, some tender, all worth remembering. Stay with us, subscribe, comment, and invite others to discover these untamed stories. From our hearts to yours. Thank you for being part of this journey. Aviso legal, barra disclaimer. Each story shared here is produced for storytelling enjoyment. Certain scenes may include fictional or dramatized elements inspired by historical circumstances. Although AI tools assist us in visuals narration and script development, the emotional tone, editing, and quality control are conducted by people to ensure meaningful experiences. We fully uphold YouTube's policies, using no deceptive recreations or impersonations of real individuals. All creative resources are properly licensed. Unauthorized copying, re-uploading, or remixing is not permitted. Thank you for supporting the effort behind every episode we create.